are back, episode 7 for the A is A podcast, where we believe truth is a cornerstone to your success. We have a super exciting topic today to talk about with Andy and Ricky, and we'll jump right into it today. Hey, guys.
Hey, what's up?
Hey.
How you doing, guys? All right, so the topic today, movement or movement practice, we'll say, versus traditional exercise. And this one is, I thought this would be a fun one because, you know, Josh and I, we got into kind of movement practice, I guess we'll call it, when Josh hired Ido Portal, who kind of leads in this space, to be his coach for a little while. And a lot of people get confused. I think, Ricky, we were talking before the podcast started, you had seen like pictures of things we were doing at our gym. And sometimes it looks like we're rolling around on the floor, or, you know, I joked that you see an Instagram video of Josh and it looks like he's doing like slow motion break dancing and stuff. You know, we do a lot of pretty unique things at Co-Movement, and it's all stemming from the movement practice stuff that we got into. And I think sometimes that kind of confuses people when they find our gym and they look through our social media and stuff, and they're like, what do these guys do? Like, what's happening over there? So I thought it'd be kind of fun to talk about what the difference is between, you know, traditional exercise like most people do in gyms across the country and have done for decades, versus this kind of new space that's emerged in the last like 15 years or so, which is being called movement culture or movement practice. Like I said, kind of spearheaded by Ido Portal, just to give credit where credit's due there. And we learned a lot of stuff from him, especially with Josh being one of his clients for a while. So, and this is gonna be an interesting one for me too, because I almost had a little trepidation deciding to make this the topic, because it's something I've wrestled with in my mind. I've had a lot of people ask me, like, what do we do at our gym? You know, what is this movement stuff? And I've always had a really hard time putting words to it and trying to describe to people how it is different from kind of the typical stuff that's been done in gyms for you know, so many decades now. I'm kind of almost wondering too where we should start with this. Maybe I'd like to almost ask you guys if you tried to just define really quickly for the audience, just to get people started with a quick, simple definition or description. How would you guys define or describe movement practice, and how would you define or describe traditional exercise, we'll call it, or traditional exercise? I don't know, if maybe Josh, if you want to take a stab at that. And just to let the audience know, this is going to be, we have some deeper dive topics. This is going to be more of a conversation where you're probably going to see us searching for words and trying to figure out how to describe things here, because we're sort of figuring out how to do this in real time too. But you want to give it a go, Josh?
Yeah, I think I want to start out with saying, like, what brought me to working with Ido at the time, and sort of the background with that. And I think that may lead us into this topic really nicely. So, like, you know, at 33 years old, and I'm 38 now, you know, I found Ido after doing, you know, CrossFit for, competitively for 7 years, upwards of 9 years total. And at one point, my body stopped responding to adding more weight on the bar. The movements started just to repeat themselves, so I adapted really easily. And it was sort of like the end of the road. And I asked myself, you know, is there more to this fitness than just, you know, doing thrusters, burpees, and kettlebell swings? And I got that answer, and that was working with Ido. And the biggest thing that I saw as a difference is that with that approach, we're really looking at fitness from a movement complexity standpoint instead of isolated patterns. And so what I mean by that, so like an isolated pattern would be doing chin-ups. So you can do 1 chin-up and then 5 chin-ups, and then you're doing chin-ups Monday, Wednesday, Friday for 1,000 years. And you never change that. And you never change the variation. You never change the complexity. You never change anything within that. And your body slowly starts to adapt to such a way that it's almost doing nothing for you, right? And from a training perspective, it gets quite boring. Right? So like we've all seen the crew that comes in Mondays chest day, Wednesdays leg day, Fridays core. And 10 years later, they're all doing the same weight. They're just wearing more knee wraps, more shoulder injuries, blah, 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 blah. And so I didn't want to be that. And so what I found very interesting was that when you look at fitness, because this is all fitness, whether you call it movement, fitness, whatever, I just want to clear that up. It's still fitness. Complexity leads to an endless amount of options when training. And that, someone as an aging athlete, 38 years old, that makes it exciting to be in the gym, to learn new things, to not focus on just adding weight all the time, session after session, because that stops at a point. So the movement complexity is really what differentiated fitness and movement, and hence our brand Co-Movement, where we focus a lot on movement complexity. So I'll give the listeners an example. So let's say we said chin up. So you have the chin up, and then if we look at it from a complexity standpoint, we can get into rope climbs, archer chin ups, one arm chin ups, one arm eccentrics, archer lock offs, ring row variations, contralateral ring row variations, one arm contralateral ring row variation. Like there's so many different kinds of chin up variations that we can spend time on, phases on, and all of that. That what I found, when you get away from what you were used to, let's say doing chin-ups for 10 years, and then you shift a phase or 2 or 6 phases into a different complexity within that pattern, and then you go back to the original, you're stronger, and you weren't training it directly.
Yep.
And that has been you can do this with hundreds of movements, but I think that the reason most fitness facilities don't is because they don't have the knowledge on the complexity, but then they also don't understand how to progress these clients through the progressions safely and in a timely manner. I think that's probably the big difference in my mind.
Yeah, and Josh, I mean, I think you hit that nail right on the head, because I think a lot of people that are being trained and that are learning all these things are like in school, are being trained weightlifting or running or some sort of sport or some sort of activity. But very rarely do I ever see anyone doing any actual progressions in these movements in the gym. And so coming from someone who just recently joined Co-Movement and kind of being just like a weightlifter myself, I also didn't fully understand it. I can go into a gym and I can hop on any of the machines there, and they lock me in a certain motion, and I can do it. Like I could do a leg press. I could do, bench press on like a fixed machine. It's not hard, right? And I can normally overload the weight. I can put as much weight as I can manage to lift. And it was easier for me, especially whenever I was younger and I was very skinny. I've always been able to support my own weight. Like I've always been able to support more than my own weight. So whenever I was doing push-ups, I felt like, man, I can do 100, 120 push-ups, and I'm still as skinny as a string bean. So I was like, what's going on here? I couldn't figure it out. I couldn't be like, well, how do I get to this next level? How do I get bigger? And no one was telling me. There was no one that I could go to. If I went to a gym, they say, well, you should bench press. That's obvious. And so that's kind of the path I went down, and kind of where I am at now after, going through the assessment that you gave me and really seeing some of my weaknesses and my strengths, and adapting some of these more advanced movements of some of these exercises that I didn't even know existed. I've actually started seeing great results in my own physique and my overall health. My lower back was killing me from doing deadlifts and doing all these squats and all this other stuff that was overloading my back. And then, but when went through your assessment, like I said, I found that my hamstrings were very, very tight. And as soon as I started stretching that out and working that out, it was instant relief. So I'm a huge advocate for what we're doing, but I also see where a lot of these muscle heads at all these gyms are like, well, I don't understand what the hell these guys are doing or what they're talking about. Or, I got huge from, just working out in a gym.
That's beautiful. You guys,
Yeah.
You guys kicked us off really nicely here. The recurring things I'm picking up on what both of you guys said were, and these are actually all in my bullet points, so I'm glad we're all on the same page here, is, Josh touched on complexity several times. And to me, I think that's probably the biggest thing that differentiates the two modalities, is that, like Josh said, in movement practice, you're generally trying to progress in terms of complexity of movement. Whereas, in traditional exercise, you're progressing in terms of the amount of weight you're lifting or the number of reps or sets that you're doing or whatever. So it's a slightly different focus. And I think I also heard a lot about health there. Josh mentioned, and so did Ricky, about how traditional exercise, you a lot of times, unless you're very cautious with it or, smart about it, which a lot of people are, but a lot of people aren't, it does lead to injuries down the road from these repetitive patterns that you're just overloading. And, because the only way to progress is through added weight, you're always just trying to push yourself harder and harder. And a lot of times that does result in injury. Whereas when you're progressing in terms of complexity, you end up going through new ranges of motion, new patterns and stuff like that, developing new patterns, and end up finding out that you feel a lot better after doing a lot of movement practice. And you still get stronger. Josh had mentioned that you do all these more advanced, more complex pulling variations. And then all of a sudden you go back to your chin up and you find that you're stronger in that, even though you weren't just pushing heavier and heavier weight, you were progressing in complexity, but it also made you stronger and more mobile and healthier. What was the other thing that I heard there? Josh kind of touched on is the learning component. I think that's one of the cool things with movement is that, ideally with traditional exercise as well, you're learning a lot. There's a lot to learn there along the way about perfect form and, how your body adapts to things. But movement takes it to a whole new level where your brain is always super involved because it's trying to learn patterns that it's never done before. And I think that's really valuable. It keeps you focused, it keeps you engaged. And, the more patterns that your body is capable of, the better, because life is going to throw a lot of things at you. Were you going to say something, Josh?
Yeah. One thing I want to add in there, Andy, you said it perfectly with the learning piece, is when I worked with Ido, he had said that each phase was made up primarily of a level 1, 2, and 3 skill-based movement. And so level 1 being that you can't do it and that you have to learn it and experiment with it and try to break the ice with it. Level 2 is you can do it, but you're not sufficient at it. And then level 3, you've mastered it. And then each phase, that wheel keeps spinning. So you're continually seeing some new stuff that you can't really do, but you're going to learn how to. Then you're sharpening the edges on some other stuff at level 2. And then level 3 is your maintenance mode. And that has, for me, has never stopped. And how long have we been doing this for? Quite some time. And, that leads to a lot of hope within the fitness world of not, seeing the same thing over and over again. Yeah. And then the other thing you said, Andy, was, and again, Ido coined this term, is 1 + 1 does not equal 2. And that was what he was getting at with if your only viewpoint on achievement within fitness is adding more weight, your day is coming to an end because you're not going to be able to add more weight indefinitely forever. At any age, you're going to peak, whether you peak first or age gets you first, one of them will win or both.
Right.
And then if your goal is just 5 more pounds on that bench press, if that's the only way that you can objectively define success, you're going to be in a bad spot mentally, unless you reframe it to movement complexity.
Yeah. Two things things I want to touch on with what you just said. You brought up Ido's kind of framework of the level 1, level 2, level 3. One of the things I like about movement practice is that it forces you to learn how to, embrace the suck, or just, be okay with being terrible at something. Because level 1 is always, and especially with these more complex patterns, they feel incredibly awkward when you start them. I mean, you and I have gone through it a million times, how frustrating some of these things are. And we're just like, it could be just like one of the most beginner variations of, one of these patterns that progresses down the line. But you're just terrible at it right off the bat. And you're like, this is awkward. I look ridiculous. My brain just doesn't get how to do this. It's like trying to learn a bike. Every single time you're learning a new or progressing through movement practice, you're in that level 1 phase. It's like trying to ride a bike all over again. And you're falling on your face. And I mean, you and I have fallen over, landed on our face a million times, in the gym.
Yeah.
So, and that's a good thing, because so many people in the traditional fitness world, once they kind of learn the basics, they know how to do like the main lifts, and then they just do those forever. They never end up in that period where they're a total beginner, and they have to learn how to cope with that mentally. And that's a really valuable thing to go through.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep. And then you also mentioned,
yeah, I think the vast majority of people within the generalized fitness world is living in level 3 all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Learning movements within level 1 or level 2. They're not sharpening the spear on anything. If you go to like the YMCA or Globo Gym, or any kind of generic stale fitness place, you're going to see sort of a monotonous, boring view of, there's really not a lot of learning going on in those settings. And I'm not saying that's everyone by any means, but I would wager that it's a high percentage.
Yeah.
So,
And so, I'm still one of those guys that actually, I go to the YMCA every once in a while. And now while I'm there, I'm doing progressions towards like a 1-arm push-up or a 1-arm pull-up. And I can see like people start watching me when I'm at the gym. When I used to be at the gym, no one was watching me. I was just doing my, bent over row or my bench press or my squat and like everybody else. And now whenever they see me, they're like, there's no way I could do that. Like, they're like, that's a little challenging right there. I have my one arm completely taken out of the point, out of the question. It's still stabilizing me. But I'm still doing like a 1-arm push-up, and people just can't wrap their heads around it. And I think I want to touch on one of your other points you guys said about like the whole complexity thing. I think that's what turns a lot of people off from what you guys do, is because they don't understand it. When they try it, they look like an idiot, like you're saying, and they don't want to look like an idiot, and they don't want to fail. But I think people need to, if they have a good trainer and they have a good coach, then I think, that would help out a lot, because that would be, I was always in martial arts when I was younger. And I think that really gave me an edge for like my stabilizing muscles and things like that, which a lot of other athletes may not have, because, for some of the things that you guys were having me do, during the course and during my learnings, I can do a handstand push-up. I don't know of a ton of people that can do a handstand push-up, but I know a lot of people that could do a military press. And, sometimes they can do even more than they weigh. But sometimes whenever you add that complexity level where you have to kind of balance yourself and you need to do, use those stabilizing muscles, they can't even push their own weight up in a handstand push-up. So.
Yep, it's a game changer. The balance component. Ricky, I wanted to touch on something there. What you were saying about how a lot of people don't want to get into it because of the complexity. That is one thing I like, is that it's I'm very much in favor of people having their egos smashed from time to time, especially me. Like, I love, things that are humbling. I think that's a really valuable thing to go through. And that's one of the huge benefits of movement practice, is it will smash your ego over and over and over again, until to the point where you don't have one anymore. And you just, you know that this is going to be challenging, and you start to enjoy that. And that's a really good place to be mentally. And then you also said, people getting into it, that might turn them off, unless hopefully they have a good coach to help them with it. And I think something important to say is that a good coach in the movement space is going to be someone who helps you embrace the failing, embrace the unique difficulties that come with this practice, and get you to enjoy it, and bring you to that place where you don't mind the difficulty and the awkwardness and the failing over and over again, and you start to actually enjoy it. Like, that should be kind of the role of the coach in movement, or at least one of the big roles, I would say.
Yeah, and can you guys hear me okay?
Yep, you're a little glitchy, but we can hear you.
Okay, good. So I think both of you touched on that really well, is that, yes, it's intimidating, probably to most people if they're doing it on their own, or they go to an unprofessional facility that really doesn't understand the mechanics behind what it takes to create success. But when you find the right environment that's welcoming, is comfortable, and is safe with true professionals that are walking the walk, not watching, YouTube on how to learn how to do this stuff, but they're actually putting the time in. Mm-hmm. That is what's going to create a true home for people that want to search for movement complexity, the next thing to chase, because they feel safe and they know there's a confident path to do it. But the rest of it, yeah, I would say for sure, if you don't have access to the facility or the coach and the knowledge with the experience, you're probably better off staying in your comfort zone until you can find a place like that.
Mm-hmm. Right. So maybe what I'll say next is, just to make this a little bit more specific. I had a few bullets when I was trying to think of like what characterizes traditional exercise, and then like some things that characterize traditional or movement practice. Maybe I'll just read down my little list here, and you guys can see if you agree with these points, or if you change them or what. But when I think of traditional exercise, I'm thinking that it's done with the intent to elicit a specific physical adaptation. You're either trying to strengthen a certain muscle, biceps with bicep curls or whatever. You're trying to grow or build a muscle, but potentially if you're trying to get bigger. Maybe lengthen a muscle if you're trying to work on flexibility or something. Increase work capacity, optimize a specific energy system, burn calories to lose weight, something along those lines. That's usually the goal with traditional exercise. Mm-hmm. And that you're doing well with traditional exercise when you're achieving those things. Month after month, you have bigger muscles in the areas that you want to be bigger, or more strength in the areas that you want to have more strength, et cetera, losing weight. Traditional exercise is usually very specific or targeted. You're usually working on like one muscle at a time. You're doing a chest exercise, then you're doing a bicep exercise, then you're doing a leg exercise or whatever, a quad exercise. Mm-hmm. The execution is often very linear. You're usually moving in like one specific plane of motion. It's, the sagittal plane out in front of you, or the, frontal plane out to the sides. But there's not a lot of deviation from that. You're moving in like a line pretty much usually. And often the execution is also meant to be as simple as possible. Like with traditional exercise, you're usually not moving anything else on the rest of the body. Sometimes you're even sitting in a chair with like a back support or something while you're doing an overhead press. You're really trying to just target that one muscle or that one muscle group that you're trying to work with that exercise. As opposed to what I've got for what characterizes movement is that this is done more with the intent, the long-term goal of making us a better mover in general. And so what does this mean? Like improved control of your body and joints in extreme or weird ranges of motion, and improved comfort in those weird or unusual positions. Better control over your body, especially like transitioning into and out of different positions, better coordination and balance. And we know that we're doing well in movement practice when, I think in movement practice, usually one of the things that's highly prized and one of the things you're shooting for is, the word that comes to my mind is graceful. Like once movements start to look graceful, especially when you're like combining two of them and transitioning between them, in the beginning, it's incredibly awkward and you look like a fish out of water. but eventually you might develop enough awareness to start being able to do these things with a lot of control and fluidity. You know, a good example is like, if you see someone who can't dance versus someone who knows how to. I mean, I've tried salsa dancing a few times, and even if you know nothing about salsa dancing at all, you could watch me and be like, yeah, he doesn't know how to do this. You know, it's very clear. It's very clear that I'm not good at it. And again, even if you don't know anything about salsa dancing, you can watch someone who's been doing it for decades, you know, like, oh, they know what they're doing. That just looks good, you know? So as opposed to like traditional exercise where maybe you're trying to make the body look good, in movement practice, we're trying to make a certain movement or a sequence of movements look good and look graceful, and feel good too, because certainly movements executed with a lot of control and precision and done correctly really feel good to do. You know, if I watch a dancer who really knows what they're doing, I'm like, not only does it look good, but I'm like, that looks like it feels good, you know? Whereas if you watched me salsa dance again, you're like, ugh, that looks painful.
Well, yeah, I want to comment a little bit on the dancing thing because,
go for it.
yeah, you know, whenever I first started out as a dancer at West Virginia University, and I don't know if anyone of them are going to watch this and be like, yeah, he really did suck whenever he first started, because I definitely had everyone laughing at me when I first started. But eventually you start getting asked to be in like some of the performances. And, you know, that was very nerve-wracking for me because I still sucked. Like I knew I still sucked, but I was one of 7 guys. So choices were kind of small if you wanted a guy in your piece. And, you know, it took a lot of practice and a lot of practice and a lot of failing. I can remember dropping women on me just because I couldn't lift them or I couldn't do whatever the movement was that they thought I could do.
Was that done on purpose, Ricky?
No, I would never, never do it on purpose, but I tried to be as graceful as possible when I dropped them.
Okay.
So, but like you said, whenever you know, people always see the final performance, right? And they're like, wow, that looked amazing. Or if you were bad, it didn't look so great. But, you know, in most times, like I just remember the first time that you nail that movement, whenever you get, you know, you've been practicing it, you practice it for like months. And then as soon as you hit it and it just feels right.
Yep.
Like that's an amazing feeling. And there's nothing like that.
I agree completely. Doing a movement properly for the first time that you weren't getting before, maybe a move in dancing or something like that, that's more satisfying to me than doing like another 10 pounds on some lift. I mean, that's satisfying too, but there's just something that internally feels incredible about being like, oh my God, I just did that. And now my brain gets it, you know? That's super cool. I just had a couple more in the movement thing, so I'll just finish it off. Focuses more on skills or patterns as opposed to specific muscles. So it's more of a brain developer, like I already said before, versus just a physical developer. A lot of awareness over what you're doing. You got to pay attention and focus. The execution is non-linear. You know, we're not just moving through one plane. Now, you know, one of the things, like Josh, you mentioned this to clients all the time, is that life doesn't happen in straight lines, you know, especially if you're an athlete or something out there on the field. But no matter what you're doing, we're always twisting and rotating and bending at weird angles, or we're on uneven surfaces or whatever. And that's a good way to get hurt if you don't let the body adapt to those strange positions. And you don't really do that too much. You know, you see people get incredibly strong with traditional exercise in their very tightly controlled, specific, you know, direction that they're moving in. But then if they move out of that and beyond it, that's where injuries can happen. So I think movement practice, being non-linear, helps you out a lot in that way. You know, what comes to mind for me, Josh? Yeah, go for it.
So yeah, you mentioned earlier with the strength, the differences, like what I'll call like weight room fitness strength.
Yep.
And then you have organic strength. It's a term, you know, Andy, we've used this a lot at our facility. And organic strength would be something that is like what you had said, sort of not a scripted or staged movement that's perfectly up and down in the perfect setting and the perfect conditions. It's sort of somewhat unpredictable, very rotational, maybe explosive, And that's a whole different world of strength. And that is something that I was highly, and still am today, interested in developing over fitness weight room strength.
Yeah.
When you, and I'll give two clear examples. Rock climbing. So rock climbing to me is the perfect definition of organic strength, where you'll see an actual climber do a climb and it looks quite easy and sort of maybe monotonous. And then you try it and you can bench 315, squat 400 and do 10 pull-ups, and you can't do two moves off the ground.
Right.
And, you know, that's organic strength. And if you were to ask that climber, what muscle are they working? There's no answer to that. There's no answer. And when we talk about, Andy, we talk about this a lot, full body tension.
Mm-hmm.
That's a characteristic that goes in climbing, grappling, dancing, pretty much all the time, is full body tension.
Mm-hmm.
And that, again, is very hard to replicate in the fitness setting. I'm not saying it can't be done, for sure. Deadlifts, Olympic weightlifting, powerlifting, like there's legit positive movements there. But organic strength, like when someone that has a high level of organic strength, another example is construction workers in many cases, grapplers, when they get their hands on you, you know it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a different world.
Yeah.
And I don't mean like fighting wise, I just mean they're fucking strong.
Yeah.
And you know, you're not asking this dude like, or girl, like, what do you curl? They don't give a shit. They're just really strong. And to me, this happened to me years ago when I was into jiu-jitsu, 2005. I went up against a guy that was like 130 pounds. And, you know, I was 170 in a weight room fitness, YMCA. And this guy threw me around like it was like I was a rag doll. And I'm thinking to myself, like, why is that? I know I'm stronger than this guy. You may be stronger in a set series of exercises and movements in a staged location, but your organic strength is weak.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that if more people really gravitated towards organic strength, like you could even take it down so far as to saying, like, you know, kayaking, right, down a river, like anything that is somewhat unpredictable, rotational in real life, that is the strength to develop. So I just wanted to go off on that a little bit.
Well, yeah, I kind of agree. I mean, I don't fully know myself the ins and outs of this, but I think there's something to it, you know, where if you just want to look good and you want to build a physique that, you know, impresses people, you can do that in a gym. You know, it's possible. And even sometimes I think even with certain movements, if you get really good at all these movements, sometimes you may need to do some weight training to embellish certain muscle groups.
Absolutely.
If that's what you're looking for. You know, if you still want functional strength, you don't really need a gym. You don't need that type of gym setting, you know, a traditional weightlifting setting. And you're right, because, you know, I mean, I'm strong. I'm not like super, you know, I'm not like in any of these like strongman competitions, but
you're strong.
but I am stronger than I'd say the average person. And where was I going with this? But, you know, my functional strength, like the organic strength that you were talking about, was not quite there. Yes, I had it from maybe dancing, from my martial arts, and from, you know, my Navy training and stuff like that. And I had some of it, but it wasn't a lot. And I think there's something to this where when you do these weird, or I shouldn't say weird, but when you do these organic movements, your muscles start working together almost as like a network versus as individuals.
Yes.
And I think that is, and I don't know if there's any science to back any of this or anything. I'd have to dive into the literature and see. And it's something I am curious about, but I really think your body was meant to work as one unit, not individual pieces.
Yep. So actually, I'm going to just go right to my next bullet, because just the last two things I had under what characterizes movement is exactly what you just said. You know, we already touched on the execution is more complex. And what I wrote was that, you know, generally the movement practice involves coordination of several different areas of the body all at once. In fact, it's almost always full body as opposed to being isolated. And you just perfectly explained why that's so valuable. You know, when you isolate body parts and get them strong working by themselves, you might find that when you try to use everything all at once, things fall apart because you have to teach your body how to use all the different pieces together. You know, there's something your body has to learn. And again, I don't know the exact science here either, you know, how to explain this properly, but there's definitely like little supportive muscles and things that have to fire to make sure that this muscle group can work with this muscle group, not to mention the awareness of being able to, you know, do something with one muscle group and the other muscle group at the same time, you know, like trying to play piano with both hands, you know? So, and then the last thing I had was just that movement practice is not so much about the sets and reps like it is with traditional exercise. It's more about, I think it's more about time spent in quality, deliberate practice, I guess I'll say. You know, and even in more advanced stages, improvisation and creativity become a big component often. You know, my example there was like Ido Portal doing his, what does he call them, Josh? Floreo routines. And these are things where he's doing sequences of movements on the floor. And a lot of times this is what looks like almost like slow motion breakdancing, I said. And he'll do that for like 10, 15 minutes straight. And it's a lot of just improvising and trying new moves and seeing what he can link together in a graceful, coordinated way. And I know, Josh, you did a few of those routines yourself.
Yeah, so like Ido broke it down really nicely into 3 categories. You have isolation, which would be, let's say, a chin up. And then you have integration, which would be like a ring routine. So like you're integrating it into a actual routine beyond just the isolated movement. Yep. And then you have improv, and improv is the highest form of movement complexity ever. Dance, martial arts, you know, it's the unpredictable flow of movement harmoniously syncing together. And when you can do that gracefully, that is the highest level mover that you will find is an improv mover.
Yeah, yeah. So, all right. So the next one I had, if we want to move on to the next little topic here, was I wanted to ask you guys what you thought about when is one better than the other? You know, movement practice versus traditional exercise, and for whom? Like, who would you say would benefit most from traditional exercise? Who would benefit most from movement practice? I don't know if Josh, if you want to try to hit that right off the bat. It's a tough one. I had a hard time figuring out what to say about this.
Well, I think movement practice can serve everyone, you know, because that's varying degrees. You know, varying degree, what I mean is like you could be 80 years old working on spinal waves or like learning to juggle, right? Like there's so many variations at all ages with the movement side of it. So I think that's for everyone. Now, with what we could call the fitness world or more of a structured world, I think that plays a huge role in 2 perspectives. One being like a rehab perspective, where you need to rehab and build a certain specific muscle group up back to where it was. I think that's big. The other area would be a very specific segment of training that needs to improve. It could be, again, a specific muscle. It could be for a competition. You know, we're not talking generalized life. I'm talking super specific. That does need a ton of isolation. You know, and so when you're looking at, you know, Olympic level athletes, they're not just going into their sessions improving, you know, everything and, you know, right. It's very, very, very specific, isolated, and boring. So yeah, I think those would probably be the 2 main areas, but yeah, the movement practice or the philosophy of movement complexity is I believe for everyone. Sure.
Yeah,
like and even I'll add, I have one more thing I'll add in there. So like Conor McGregor, brought in Ido
Yep.
for his fight, three fights, I think.
Yep.
And Connor has his, jujitsu coach, his boxing coach, his kickboxing coach, his strength and conditioning coach, and then you have Ido.
Mm-hmm.
And Ido came in with these very unique practices, many of which that I've seen and done, just to give Connor a very different ability and viewpoint to move better
Mm-hmm.
and more organically and outside the box.
Yep.
And so like when he knocked out Jose Aldo in 13 seconds, that was, there was a lot of prep that went into that particular knockout.
Yeah,
And
we know
he gave
that
a lot of credit to you.
we know that Connor has phenomenal reaction time and stuff, but I know that he and Ido were doing a lot of reaction specific drills where he was like trying to quicken his reactions even more. And that's what that knockout was just an incredible like split second reaction to what his subconscious saw happening right in front of him. The training.
Another area they spent a lot of time on was space, like understanding where they are in relative to being striped. And that was very, very interesting to see how good that they can get knowing where they are in space with kicks and punches.
Connor is phenomenal at judging distance. It's amazing to be watching in slow motion. When he dodges a punch, he might move his head back 1 inch and he doesn't even flinch. He doesn't even look concerned, even though this haymaker of a punch came within a centimeter of his face, because he knows exactly the distance that he is from his opponent.
Yeah, and one of the sayings that Connor said after a fight there was timing beats speed, precision beats power. So speed and power is what I would correlate to more of maybe the fitness world, right? And timing and precision is more of the movement world.
Yes.
And that was beautifully said. I was like,
brilliant.
It makes sense. Makes a lot of sense.
Did you have any thoughts, Ricky, on which one you think is better for who, and who would benefit from one or the other the most?
Yeah, actually I do. I'd say anyone would benefit from either if they are currently doing nothing.
Yes.
I would say moving in general and getting to a gym and working out is better than doing nothing at all. For myself, if you had asked me last year, I would have been like, you need to get into a gym, you need to start lifting, you need to start doing some cardio, you might need to start doing this, that, or the other thing, but you need to start lifting weights and building muscle. And, there is something to it. Lifting, resistance training does have a lot of added benefits. I mean, your bone density goes up, so it even helps, older individuals as their bone densities decrease over time. Resistance training does help with that. So these were all things that I had learned and I had picked up, and things that were kind of in my mind. But as I've come, like now, if you ask me this year, now that I, have joined your team and seeing what you guys do and how movement has changed even my own life, I would say that movement is more important for everybody and for the average person. And kind of second what Josh was saying, where in those very few instances where if you are training for a specific thing, like you want to max out your deadlift and you want to have the heaviest deadlift in the world, then yeah, you should be training deadlift, because otherwise it's not gonna happen. But in every instance, if you just want a better quality of life and you just want to live the best life that you can, then I think overloading your body with these heavy weights, it's not as good as just moving traditionally and organically. Nice.
Yeah, I love the answers that both of you guys gave, and I really don't have to say too much because you said exactly what I would have. I put, and I like that you guys both touched on the fact that that they're both valuable. Josh said earlier, we can call it, gym fitness or traditional fitness or traditional exercise and movement practice. They're all part of the same bubble of fitness, and they're both valuable for your overall fitness. And you guys didn't discount either as being important, which I think is really, I hope the listeners heard that, because that is our mindset, and we do see value in both. I know with my clients, you know, and it depends on the client, but we do a combination of both, you know, and some clients, it's all just traditional exercise, because I do think that sometimes with beginners, and Josh did mention that, you know, movement practice can be scalable, and there's stuff that I can do with a lot of my beginners, but you do, to be healthy and to live a long life, you do want to have a certain level of strength and just general base fitness. And a lot of times with people who are completely new to any exercise at all, traditional exercise is a good way to kind of build up that prerequisite strength before we start trying to add in complexity and some of these more difficult, because the you know, the movement practice is a little more difficult to learn, as we've already said. So I want to get these people started off on the right foot, get them comfortable with the simpler movements or the simpler traditional exercises first, build a little foundation of muscle, make their body, get their body to the point where it's more capable of doing some of these more interesting things that might be more on the movement side of things. And certainly, like Ricky said, anytime that you have like a specific, you know, muscle or strength that you want to develop, that's what traditional exercise is for. They're very targeted, and they can bring up that weak spot or that area where you're having some pain because you have some muscle imbalance and we need to correct it. So yeah, exercise, both of them are super important. Yeah, under movement practice, I just had that there's a level appropriate for everyone. That's exactly what Josh said. Yeah, I do find though that I think it's people who are a little more fit and have that base level, they tend to get a little more out of the movement practice because we can progress through them a little bit quicker, you know. And also people who've done more traditional exercise and at least kind of know their body a little bit more than just someone who's never done anything, they have a little bit more awareness of their body, which is really important in the movement stuff. But on the flip side, the movement stuff is really good for developing that too, which is why I like the combination of both. Which actually brings me to like the next topic I had was, do you guys see benefit in combining the two? And I know that you both do. And would we say that they kind of enhance one another, like combining the two?
Yeah. I don't, and I said this earlier when we were talking, I don't really differentiate them.
Yeah, good for you.
Yeah. So, you know, when we talk about like base levels of fitness or movement complexity or this or that, it's all movement.
Yeah.
I think we go back to the philosophy of not just wanting to stick with the same old patterns, the same, you know, movement, you know, structured movement with adding more weight for years on end, right? And then once we transcend that mindset, yeah, for sure, you know, fitness and movement are in the same category. You know, I think there's numerous variations for all of them, and you know, whether you're
neglected.
No, and I don't think that we need to look at, and I definitely don't want listeners to think of like someone that is more on the co-movement side of it, or the movement complexity side, that it's just unique, weird movements. It's nothing. It's absolutely nothing like that.
You see me with my clients all the time, and we're doing a ton of traditional weightlifting exercise. Yep.
Yep. And they all fit into the movement side of it. But what you're not doing, Andy, is training them on a dumbbell shoulder press for 8 years in a row to go up 10 pounds. That's what you're not doing. And what they don't see is maybe people on the outside is 1 week, maybe it's the dumbbell press. You know, the next week it's a variation of an Arnold press. The next week it's a wall walk, a handstand wall walk. You know, next week it's scapular push-ups. Like, whatever it is, again, the goal based on their assessment and abilities, right? But we're not stuck in that traditional machine-based, static, sterile pattern. Right? Yeah. So movement is more of a fancier, cool version.
There's more variety and you can change it up. But I mean, I definitely agree that you need to do both, because I mean, even for myself, I've mainly done weightlifting, but I've also done a lot of sports and activities. So in a way, you can say I've kind of done both, just not. I never really focused on the movement as much. It was more just playing, in a sense. But one thing that I would say that weightlifting is actually little bit better at than movement, if I'm saying for my own personal view, would be strength training.
Mhm.
Because it's really easy to, you're kind of limited to your body weight. And even in sometimes, like you were saying, Andy, beginners can't even do their own body weight. So you have to build them up to that by doing some sort of like, strength training type thing.
Absolutely.
But for me, in order to progress and get stronger, I normally have to push myself. I would have to do some crazy movements, which I may not even be capable of doing if I was trying to, do it strictly through calisthenics or something along those lines.
Well, you make a good point there, because a lot of times in movement, the progressions there can be a really big jump from, if a certain type of movement has, like, there's the first step, then the second, then the third, then the fourth, and so on. These are the progressions. Sometimes getting from step 4 to step 5 is a massive leap. And we can get you to step 4, and then we see that you're struggling trying to get to step 5, and it's a long way off. And we can incorporate some traditional weightlifting to bring up the areas that we know you need to help you get to step 5. So yeah, they definitely complement each other really well. I also like that you mentioned sports. Sports are definitely movement. That's a lot of just weird angles and variations and improvisation and reaction. One of the things I had written down was that movement practice won't necessarily make you stronger, or it might not make you stronger quickly. It'll make you stronger over time, but maybe not as fast as weights, like you said. But then traditional exercise and weightlifting won't make you a better mover. That's why I like combining the two. The example I have to give, because it's my background, is rock climbing, where I've done a lot of strength training for rock climbing, because unfortunately, I live in upstate New York, where we have like 8 months of snow. So I don't get to go rock climbing all year round. So I do a lot of strength training for my sport in those months off. And what I've noticed over the years of doing this is that I'm actually a lot stronger than many of my rock climbing peers. But many of them who only rock climb or do it year round, or they have a rock climbing gym nearby and they go 3 days a week, even though I'm stronger than them, they're better at rock climbing than I am. And it's the same thing that Josh said about being stronger than the 135-pound kid in jiu-jitsu, but then he was better at jiu-jitsu than you. So, this is where, like, climbing is a movement practice. It's a skill sport. And the only way to reach your potential there is to improve your skill. So that's, and that the same thing can be said for any sport, I think.
Yeah, and I think we have to be careful with how we define strength. So when we say we use traditional fitness to get stronger, in what?
Yeah, and that's not necessarily organic strength, right?
Well, yeah, organic, but it could be very like a handstand push-up. I don't think is considered so much organic. It's pretty, it's a pretty defined, piece of movement, but that's not gonna get better through shoulder press.
No.
So when I look at like, I guess we could look at, so 3 examples would be like a guy that can do 165-pound Smith machine shoulder press versus a guy that can do 165-pound shoulder press standing, free weights, versus a handstand push-up freestanding. They're all lifting 165 pounds, but if you think the level of strength is the same, you're crazy.
Right.
They're nowhere near the same.
Right.
And so, that's the pendulum that we're talking about there. And so, we definitely need weights, and we need the traditional pieces along the way for sure. But how we define strength is unique too, because like Ricky, you had said, I think it's something along the lines of like strength training in the regular fitness world, right, is more to get stronger. Well, for me, and I know Andy, our primary upper body training, like all of it, is gymnastics work on the rings and body weight. And so, there's articles from Coach Summers saying that his gymnasts can push jerk 1.5 times to 2 times their body weight and deadlift 2 times their body weight without doing push, jerk, or deadlifts. And so there's some very interesting carryovers there. Now, I will contradict myself slightly here. With the lower body, being that it's such a different muscle group, we do need in some instances, more of the base lifts, squats, deadlifts, cleans, right? So when we get into upper body and core strength, you know, a hard day on the rings is a very different feeling than a hard day doing presses and curls.
Yeah.
Neither's right or wrong, but we're defining what our definition is of strength. So I could care less if I could shoulder press my body weight with a barbell. But what I do care is if I can do three reps of freestanding handstand push-ups. To me, that's a more useful, higher level of strength. Whether it converts to me doing my body weight on the shoulder press, I could care less about. So I guess it's sort of up to the individual with where they want to put that definition.
And I think you're getting there. I think that is right what you're saying. And I think that would actually, if you can do a freestanding handstand push-up, you can probably, you know, shoulder press your weight with a barbell. That's pretty much a given. But what I also like how Andy put it, like, and I did say that, you know, I do it to develop my strength and to get stronger. I think it's whenever you can't get to that next movement to help you get there. Like, I can't do an iron cross. I can't do a one-arm pull-up. Like, I can't do certain things. So using that weightlifting to make myself stronger in the sense that it can then somehow transition as I practice these other movement skills, and hopefully that they would then allow me to do the next level movement to then make me even stronger and more functionally, organically stronger. I think that's more of where I was coming from.
Can I say something about that? You just triggered something in my brain. Part of the reason that sometimes the traditional strength training works so well for helping you break those strength plateaus is one of the common pitfalls with people doing movement practice is that because they are a little more complex and because they use so much of the body, they're a lot easier to cheat. So I think movement practice, you can actually progress and get incredibly strong without even doing any traditional weightlifting. But the problem is your form has to be perfect, because it's incredibly easy on some of these things, like a handstand push-up, for example. It's really easy to arch your back or you know, do something that makes the movement easier, but isn't strengthening what you want to. You know, we all know that, like let's say traditional barbell curls, you need to keep a nice tight core, keep good posture, and make sure you're actually using the biceps, which is the target muscle, versus you see guys in the weight room that are like swinging their body around and they're getting the weight up, but it's because they're cheating with that compensatory movement. That's easier to control in the weight room. You can go up to that person and tell them, oh, you know, you shouldn't be swinging your body like this, demonstrate how to do it right. And that clicks pretty quickly. But with some of these more advanced movements, there's so much to pay attention to that it can be hard for some people they'll end up cheating the movement, even though they don't want to. They're trying to be as strict as possible, but they don't realize how many ways there are to cheat it. So that's all I wanted to say there.
Yeah, Ricky, I liked your point when you had said using some traditional strength training methods to bridge the gap between movements. So I'll provide a really good example of this. So like a hanging knee raise, okay? A lot of people are able to do that, but then you take them and try to have them roll up to the tuck lever position from there. That's where the wheels fall off. And then how do you bridge that gap, right? And so like we've come up with a movement with what is it, Andy, the Victorian dumbbell pull that we do, right?
Oh, sure,
with the chest down on the right, with the lats. So there's a strength training movement that will then improve to help that client go from hanging knee raise to a tuck lever. Yes. And yeah, we do that ourselves and our clients definitely do that. And I think that's where if we were to separate them, that's where they would complement each other really, really nicely, for sure. And then again, I want to put it out there. I don't know if I said earlier, but I don't want listeners to think that the movement side of it or the movement complexity side of it is for advanced movements only.
Right.
So there's a game we play called the tennis ball drop drill.
Yep.
And this is an example of a movement complexity game where the trainer holds the two tennis balls and the client is in front of them. Trainer will drop one ball. They have one bounce to go catch the ball, but simultaneously the second ball is being dropped. So it's a reaction drill. And we do this at all ages, 70 years old, you can do this. There's the hand-foot drop drill where you dribble once with your hand, dribble once with your foot, opposite hand, opposite foot, and you do that for reps. You know, the tennis ball punch game, how many reps can you punch the tennis ball with a closed fist off the wall? There's the PVC drop drill where we hold the PVC on the end and then we just simply drop it in space in a 360-degree turn. And that client has to lunge and grab that PVC at the highest point possible. So these are all examples to not confuse the viewer, the listener, to understand that it's not just handstand, one arm chin up, straddle planche, you know, the super advanced stuff, that we can really dive very deep into movement complexity with very organic games that I've done with we do with all ages all the time. That's what makes it a lot of fun.
Lots of animal walks and things like that. I mean, yeah, we've created whole workouts that total beginners have done that were all just like movement practice sort of things.
And I think that's where, well, I think that's where a lot of people don't understand, you know, what you guys do and how important it is, because, you know, you can, everyone knows about push-ups, everyone knows about sit-ups, everyone knows about the traditional things. Even some people may know about the planche, you know, some people may know some of these more advanced moves, but what they don't know are all those transitions. A lot of people don't talk about the transitions and what it takes to do that. And that's where I think you guys really kind of separate yourselves from others, because you do use traditional training, you do use other things. You're not just doing calisthenics, where whenever I was looking into type of body weight training myself and trying to progress, a lot of these people only strictly talk about calisthenics and they don't ever emphasize that they've ever touched a weight. And you know they have, you know, but it's like they don't tell you that. They're like, oh yeah, you can totally do it by just doing all these body weight things, and you'll just magically transition from here to here. And then I tried it. I tried to do it myself, and I'm like, no, you can't. It doesn't just magically happen. So
yeah, that's a great point, Ricky. So Ido talked a lot about not subscribing to one dogma. So like you have the calisthenics crew, then you have the power lifters and the bodybuilders, and we can go on and on and on, and they all subscribe that it's the best. I'm not saying any of it's the best. I'm saying having a legit balanced movement practice with proper progressions and complexity is the best. That's a big difference from saying TRX will save the world, or CrossFit, or Pilates, or yoga, and most likely not.
So we basically got to the end of everything that I've got. Just for fun, so some people have maybe some examples of the things that we're talking about. Any movements or things you've done in the movement space that you feel has helped you the most, or any favorite ones, or ones that you use with clients the most? What are just a couple examples off the top of your head, maybe? Or your favorites.
Well, if we talk about like biggest bang for your buck with any level of ability, which is hard to categorize into one movement, it would be the Turkish get up.
Oh yeah.
The Turkish get up is a movement that you can do with no weight in just proper form. And if I can do that at 100 years old, I'll be very happy with no weight. Or you can shoot for unlimited amounts of weight. So that is to me, that's the number one. Again, we're generalizing here, and I don't like to generalize.
But for everybody.
Yeah, if I was told one movement from now till you know, when I'm out of here, that, and I could choose one that would be the Turkish get up.
I like that one. Yeah.
For me, I would say the ones that have benefited me the most, I'm not going to go generalizing or anything, but for me, I would say the tuck lever. You know, I'm still working on the tuck front lever, and that one I've seen a huge impact on my back just from that alone. When before I couldn't really develop my upper back very well, but I've started to notice a lot of changes as I've been working on the tuck front lever, even my knees behind the bar or my knees in front of the bar, you know, and then even straightening my legs on occasion to try to just get, you know, one leg at a time, trying to just get a little bit more out of it. And the straddle up is really another one that I had never heard of. I didn't even know it existed. And I started with like I think one of those like things on the floor, and I put it like 4 feet underneath, like 4 different legs underneath it. And I was working on that, and I was like, and that was hard. That was hard for me to do. And I think it was just maybe a month ago. And now I'm down to where I only have that top thing on the ground, and I'm doing it from that.
Nice.
So,
Awesome.
but yeah, so I'd say that one has made a huge impact on me.
Yeah, straddle ups for me too. That was a really big one for me. I started really high on those too before I eventually made it down to the floor. But like you, I had really tight hamstrings, and I still do have slightly tight hamstrings, but that one helped me out a lot, improved my lower body mobility. I really like anything that focuses on scapular strength. You know, that's one thing that I got a lot out of moving into the movement stuff, is you start to appreciate how important 2 things actually: scapular strength, and then like a hollow body position or a posterior pelvic tilt, and gaining that awareness and control over that. I think like with beginner clients even, or well, with all my clients, you know, just easy moves like scap push-ups and active hangs, that sort of thing, seems to have a huge benefit down the road in terms of like other things we might be progressing towards, like the front lever, you know, active hangs and arching scap pull-ins and stuff. They really they teach you where those muscles are and what they're supposed to do and what different scapular positions feel like, and then so you gain an awareness of where to keep your scapula when you're working on more advanced things. I got a lot out of that. The hand balancing too. I mean, I love handstands and stuff, and I think that's done wonders for my shoulder health. You know, just holding a static handstand and learning how to activate my lower trapezius and my, you know, keep that posterior pelvic tilt to keep a nice straight line. Just the amount of body awareness that I've gained from some of these fairly simple, you know, movement drills really helped me out a lot. You know, the frontline drill, same with, you know, the shoulder health and lower trap strengthening. And I actually really like a lot of the animal walks, especially, boy, there's one, I can't remember. I think I see it referred to as a sneaking ape walk sometimes, but just the ranges of motion that puts my ankles and my toes through and stuff. I definitely noticed my lower body was a lot looser after doing those and horse walks and some of those animal walk variations. But
yeah. Andy, you bring up a really good point with like the scapula and the upper body. One thing I think it'd be useful for people to hear is, you know, we would all agree on, through the years that we've trained clients and what we've seen within ourselves, that the upper body engine is the scapula, and the lower body engine is the glutes. And so if you have a very strong scapula, we always say 6-pack in the back. Like that's what we're concerned with, not so much the front. And then a good set of strong glutes. You have a strong human being. You can have huge pecs, biceps, and a 6-pack and be weak. And so
that whole middle section connects your upper body to your lower, and there's a lot of development of the extremities, but if you want to gain control over them and make them work to their potential, you want to be able to have your core and your scaps and your mid back to do the things that it's supposed to do.
Yeah, for sure. And, you know, I've heard it from a bunch of high level coaches where they spend 2/3 to 3/4 of their time on the posterior chain, relative to, you know, the anterior with the pushing and, you know, quads and chest and stuff. So Something that I've really never forgot, you know, if time is limited and whatnot, what I'm choosing for movements, I'm probably going to target the scapula and the glutes if I have to choose, only because that's where really the power.
And those tend to be kind of sleepy on a lot of people. You know, you hear a lot about like what is it, like glute amnesia or whatever, where people just don't know how to activate their glutes. They don't even know what it feels like to use that muscle. And I would say that the like scapular depressors, protractors, retractors, I think those are even more sleepy on people. Like they don't even know usually what it feels like to use those muscles and what those muscles can do. So awakening those things is a huge benefit to a lot of people right off the bat, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I don't know. Do you guys have anything else? Because we just hit everything I've got on my list.
I think I'm good.
Yeah, no, this is awesome conversation.
And I think we said we finally got some comments on one of our YouTube videos, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think it was on the fundamentals of healthy eating, just with some of the clarity that we've provided. You know, they were really grateful, and I know that we've got our subscribers have jumped, you know, 100 plus since starting this podcast, and they're just going upwards of, you know, 5 to 10 a day. So that's pretty cool.
Sweet. People.
So yeah, so if you're listening, subscribe.
Yeah, please, and ask questions.
No, and so that's, yeah, we're super pumped. If you have questions, you know, everyone listening, with anything you want us to address, you know, definitely send that over to us. If you're looking to become a client, whether it's an online coaching client through our Achieve program, or in person, send us an email at info@co-movement.com. You know, right now, geez, in the last month, we've exploded with the in-person side. Andy, you're full, right?
Yeah, definitely. It's a good thing.
Yeah, I know. If I send you another text message that says, can you take this person, you're going to shoot me.
Well, it's always good. I like having the options, that's for sure.
Yeah,
only so much time a day, but that's good that we're getting people on board.
Yeah, and it's a small community for the in-person. So that's, you know, and it's very, it's an amazing community, you know, but that's why we're trying to put our efforts now into the online stuff to really spread our message, you know, through our Achieve coaching program. I think it can benefit almost anyone that is serious about their fitness. And I have no doubts that it would be very effective. So
for sure.
Yeah. And if that's it, we will sign off, and we'll be back soon.